Today is a very special episode that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. With me is David Kim, the first in a long line of humanity forward candidates running for office in this election cycle. He is running for office in California's 34th congressional district, including a large section of Los Angeles City. He's running against an establishment Democrat candidate. He's been endorsed by Andrew Yang himself, the Sunrise Movement, the California Progressive Alliance, and the Income Movement, just to name a few of those key endorsements under his belt. Everyone, please put on your math hats. Hashtag yes we can. Tweet that out and welcome David Kim to the Dividend Report. David, thank you so much.
Wow, that was one of the best intros I've heard, Seth. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, well, it's
Totally
my
excited to be
pleasure.
here.
I'm excited
Yeah.
to have you on. I have to really just start out by thanking you for the awesome campaign that you're running. After Andrew dropped out for a bit, I went through this really big depressive bout, and one of the things that kind of kicked me back into gear was seeing you picking up the flame and carrying it forward and saying, we're going to have humanity first as a message going into the election cycle. We're just under about 50 days till the election. How are you feeling about everything?
Yeah, we are definitely under 50 days. We're under 20 days in terms of when mail-in ballots are being sent out here in Los Angeles County. So people will have mail-in ballots in a matter of around 3 weeks. And so we're definitely in crunch time. And one of my defense mechanisms is laughing. So we're definitely in crunch time. Um, but we're making the most of it, definitely, Seth. I think what I had just shared this with somebody else today, but as long as you're in every moment fully present, and in when you're fully present, you're doing the best of the ability that you could in that fully present moment, then what more is there to regret when you're doing all that you can? And that's what we're doing right now, because it's a very time sensitive thing to be running for office, to pushing for change, to to doing a bunch of reform that needs to be done in so many areas. And so, with that being said, we understand the urgency of that, and we don't take this lightheartedly at all. And so we're putting our all into it. So yeah, we'll find out in less than 50 days if we've done it right.
Deep breaths. It's one thing to be running for office at any normal time, but when you add on a global pandemic onto everything, I'm sure it just notches everything up to 11. How has that experience been for you?
Yeah, when the pandemic hit, it started in terms of quarantine wise. The quarantine safer at home order started after the March 3rd primary election. So it was around, I took about a few days off after the March 3rd primary election just to take a breather, since I had gone nonstop for several months. And right when we had just started coming back and started our 1 week of campaign, bam, the pandemic hits. And so we had to suddenly reorganize, move campaign efforts to digital efforts, re-strategize in terms of how do we reach our constituents digitally, how do we still connect with them, how do we do events but then still have them be meaningful and well planned. So that's where we did various live stream events focused on different issues, or different programming where we focus on a restaurant that's struggling in sales because of the pandemic, because there was only delivery that was available for food orders. And so we would shine spotlights on certain restaurants and then encourage constituents or viewers or supporters who are watching to also support, and support some meals for our unhoused neighbors here in LA. And so we would distribute those. We've participated in mutual aid efforts, food relief drops, distribution efforts, being at protests, whether they're for no rent, no vacancies, um, no evictions type of protests, or whether they be Black Lives Matter, uh, uh, defund the police, what have you. Like we've been very community plugged, and now that we are getting into November 3rd, it's like, okay, now we need to focus on campaign again. That's right, we're doing a campaign. Not to say that we weren't campaigning, but in everything that we did, we also were mindful of how many people we need to reach, how many people need to hear the word David Kim, and the fact that there is a challenger. And so by the time November hits, we hope to have reached so many people so many times through text, so many times through email, so many times through a mailer, or so many times through whatever have you. And so we're using data because we don't just campaign without any data. You need the math behind it to really win. And so that's what our team has been doing, and we've been very strategic about it because it's time for more down ballots to win, like Cory Bush, like Jamal Bowman. So why not us? And we have a very strong chance. The incumbent only won a total 52% in the primary election. And that's very low for an incumbent. Incumbents here usually win 70 to 80%, in the 80% range or 70% range. The fact that he got 52, and we are actually pulling Kenneth Mejia, the congressional candidate who ran for the same spot 2 years ago in the previous election. I had campaigned for him, and so that's how I went down the rabbit hole of now running for office. But I had campaigned for him, and he gave me something the other day, and it was analysis of our precincts. There's different ways you can analyze precinct results from primary elections, but the analysis that he showed me was, oh, there are actually areas where he got even less than 50%. And so it was just focusing on those areas where he got less than 50, also focusing on those areas where he got more than 50, but doing that strategically. How do you play with those numbers? What does that data look like when you go this way as opposed to going that way? And so those are the various things. I think overall in the beginning, we were definitely maybe hyperventilating for like a split second when the pandemic hit in terms of campaign wise, because obviously, I mean, we're not going to dodge the elephant in the room. People don't have jobs. How are they going to donate to a campaign? And for us, it's crucial because we don't take corporate PAC money. And although our opponent does, and although those corporate donors are being bailed out in the pandemic, like the people aren't. So the people have no money to donate to our grassroots campaign. So on that level, it's been a little difficult. We are about a month behind in terms of fundraising. Just being honest, we've had great months though. This last month was great. We've had a consistent streak of 17,000 and above, which is really great for a grassroots campaign each month. But I'd say we are about 1 month behind. But in all due honesty, like who's to say what can happen tomorrow, the morning when we wake up? So I don't think we're behind. I think we'll just see what happens, continue to be open-minded. But yeah, just continue to put our all in.
Yeah, and I cannot stress this enough to my listeners. We cannot get the humanity forward vision, the human centered capitalism vision to become a reality without having candidates in Congress, people who are representing our interests, not the interests of super PACs and corporations and all of these things. It is so important that we get behind your back because you have our interests in mind. So go ahead and just like give your plug to how we can donate to you right now. Hearing that you're a little bit further behind, things are really crazy in this coronavirus pandemic. Hopefully, I'm really hoping that so your incumbent is too, right? You're having to think quickly on your feet. You're having to get used to this new normal, but so are they. And hopefully, you're better in a position to take advantage of this to get through to the finish line.
Yeah. Before I do that, Seth, I wanted to comment on what you had said. Um, the fact that our campaign is a grassroots campaign, not taking money from corporate PACs, and a lot of people that we find when talking about it, some people don't know what the significance of that is, and it's fine. But I think it's our duty or our responsibility as fellow citizens, as people, fellow community members, part of this country, is to educate each other. And so the more we talk about it, the more people realize, oh, okay, it is a conflict of interest. How can you say that you're fighting for this when you're taking money from the other side? So, for example, how can you say that you're um, pushing for Medicare for all when you're taking money from pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies? How can you say you're pushing for uh, public school free secondary higher education when you're taking money from student debt collectors and payday lenders and all this other stuff? And how can you say that you're pushing for that you support Black Lives Matter when you take private prison money, and those that have been the most affected by incarceration are Black and brown brothers and sisters, because 2/3 behind bars are Black brown brothers and sisters. And how can you say, and so just I can go on, and I'm not gonna be the choir preaching, but I think it's for us to realize the reason why we have such deep distrust in the government, the reason why when we answer the phone to pick up a unknown call, and the moment we hear, "Hi, my name is David Kim," or "My name is Joe what, I'm running for blah," we instantly hang up the phone. Why do we do that? It's because we don't really think politics is something that benefits us. We don't really think that an election is something that will change. It shows in our actions. Like, actions speak louder than words. And it's not to put on this Debbie Downer, negative Nancy, point a finger blame type of thing right now, but it's to say I understand where that distrust comes from. It comes from these candidates running for office for the past decades, promising this but never acting upon it, never taking a big bold move for the people. And when you think about it, Seth, like, yes, we've had our Afghanistan conflict, and Iraq war, and Vietnam war, and Korean war, but we haven't had something as big as the World War II affecting the U.S. domestically to that point for since the 40s, in that sense, in terms of affecting domestically here at home, in different ways, and on a more massive scale as a country. We haven't had that for 60, 70 plus years, however you do the math, 70 plus years. So why is it that our country right now, most Americans live paycheck to paycheck pre-COVID? Why is it that we have people who don't have healthcare? Why is it that we have an income stagnation and income disparity that's been increasing so crazily in the past 35, 40 years? Why are we in the slum that we're in? It's because our elected officials led us here. There's nothing externally that affected us to lead us here. It's all internal, and it's all internally because of those we elect to DC, to Congress, to office, to our city, state, county. Like, we allowed that to happen. And again, I'm not blaming it on us, but then it was also us being deceived by the candidates, by corporate interests, by not being told the full picture, by our representatives during a pandemic coming back after legislating on their own behind closed chamber doors, listening to the few party officials at the top, coming back to say, "Hey, look at this crumbs I secured you, a one-time $1,200 check. This is what I have for you. You should be happy. Yeah, I understand, but nope, that's not what we did. Yeah, I understand, but nope, that's not what we did. Yeah, I totally get your story. Nope, but that's not what we did. Yeah, I totally feel it. Nope, that's not what we did." When that becomes the norm, why are we electing people into office when you're not even including the people in your decision making? Why aren't representatives having town halls with their constituents before they go vote on certain legislation? Why isn't that happening? And so these are the things that really need to be talked about. And Tulsi Gabbard's interview with Joe Rogan, for those who are listening or watching, go look that up. Go watch that interview. She talks about when she first entered Congress, how first day everybody, they have the orientation of, okay, here's your desk assignment, here's your laptop, here's all of these things. Okay, after all that's all done, Democrats, you go here, you'll never see a Republican ever again. Republicans, you go over here, you'll never see a Democrat ever again. If you have a bill that's great and it's a Democrat bill, great, go vote, co-sponsor all you want. If you see a Republican bill that fits your issues, probably don't co-sponsor or sign on it. Always check with the leader official at the top first before you even make a connection and talk about whatever that good agenda or good intention bill is. So if we're already operating in that, or if we're already operating from day one because you got elected, like we saw it in the news several weeks ago with Representative Ocasio-Cortez talking about how she had to raise so much money to pay several $100,000 in dues to the Democratic Party. With all of these things, you just become suddenly these puppets of the party that you go into. And so what Tulsi says in her interview is, for this world that is all too common with campaign, corporate interests, corporate PACs, working your way up the ladder, the hierarchy in DC, for you to run a grassroots people-powered campaign, that's too disruptive for them. That's what she said. And so that's why it's important to run a grassroots campaign, because once I'm elected, I don't have to kiss ass to anybody. I pledge my allegiance to the people, because the reason why that gives me more power is I know that if I mess up, the people will keep me accountable. I know that might look like not being reelected, that might look like in other ways, but I know that I got into the office by the people, and I'll leave the office because of the people. Like my whole thing is just with the people now. I have no corporate interest to help me to say, hey David, here's $1 million for you to win your race. None of that. It's all by the people. And so I think that system is more representative of what a government is. That's why corporate money cannot continue washing out our elections and our politics like this. And that's why Representative Ocasio-Cortez, even her, she does monthly town halls in different boroughs of her district, and that's how she had such a high re-election voter turnout with over 70%, because she kept herself accountable. She was co-governing with the people. She always included them and talked with them. And so those are the types of accountability bills that we'll also be passing, mandating elected officials to have town halls before they vote on certain issues. But I kind of digress, but that was to your point to emphasize that, Seth. Yes, it's very important for anybody. If you don't have time to study up on every candidate, first look at their donor sources. Who are they being funded by? If they're being funded by corporate interests, that's an immediate X. You can X them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of what we need, Seth, we just need volunteering support. You can go to davidkim2020.com. You can sign up there to volunteer, to donate. You can volunteer remotely through text banking or phone banking. If you do live in Los Angeles, we do have field ground game opportunities as well. But right now we are in the crunch time of sending out mailers. And for grassroots candidates, one of the main things that they never get to do is sending out mailers, because sending out mailers is so expensive. And I honestly feel, I know a lot of people will disagree, but I honestly feel that if you don't have a strong mailer campaign, it's going to really hurt you as a grassroots down ballot candidate. And so we don't want that to be a reason why we lost. And so we're really pushing out, sending out the rest of our mailers right now. We have about, I'm not going to say the number, but we have some mailers left that we need to send out and fund. So if you're listening, please feel inclined to, even if it's $1, 5, 10, 20, whatever it is. And if you can, put on recurring for the next 49 days, whether that be a week, every week, or a month. But no pressure though, because if you need the money, then totally take care of yourself, because that's also a thing that is very connected. I feel like we individually don't have enough compassion and don't take care of ourselves first. That's shown and reflected on a collective scale. Now we, the people of America, we don't care about ourselves. That's why our government's become like this. So we need to step up and take care of ourselves. So take care of yourself first, and if you do have the leeway, please donate.
Man, you covered so many important topics. I agree with you 100%. And leaving it off and saying, I understand it's difficult. We are in difficult times right now. Sometimes it feels like there are people within the upper echelons of our society that genuinely don't understand what it means to be short on change, and they won't even think about that. And you can really tell that you're coming at this from a deeply human-centered position, that you care about this. I've seen you in some of your organized protests, and I know that you're in this 100% to be in it, and you have people at the front of your heart. And really, any of my listeners who are listening right now, we need action. We won't get the future that we need, and we do need it, because one of the points that I wanted to make from what you had just said there is, increasingly in the past few months, it's become very clear that Americans have a hard time identifying structural rot and structural systemic issues, and that includes things like prison, Black Lives Matter, police brutality, but it also includes the political system that we find ourselves in that has been developed over decades. And we have a hard time visualizing and accepting, oh, hey, this is actually a very, very big problem. And it's almost like an invisible issue. And it's almost like we're the two cats on a rooftop, and the crow has been picking at one of the tails, and the cats fight each other instead of the crow. We always miss the correct issue. But I think that you have it clearly identified. And as for the mailers go, I've got one of your social media kind of flashers right here that you were endorsed by Sunrise Movement. I can really tell that you've put a lot of effort into your branding. I'm getting a lot of Ocasio-Cortez vibes here. I think it looks great. I've got nothing but optimism for your campaign overall. One of the things that I wanted to cover really quick is, because I know that we're on a little bit of a short time schedule here. Your district includes what is it? South Central East? Is it Skid Row?
It includes Skid Row, part of downtown LA.
So
Yes.
I've grown up in the South, and one of the things that has always been told to me is like, if you don't do well in school, if you don't do this, you're going to wind up like people on Skid Row. Skid Row in America is kind of like this thing that we all view as the poorest area of the country. It's like a visceral imagery. I wanted to know what that means to you as an Angelino, like having that, your area, your environment being painted in that image. Why do you think that Skid Row still to this day is dealing with the homelessness issue and the imagery that's being cast across news media across the country? And what do you think that a universal basic income might do and other aspects of your platform, of course? Because I think Skid Row in general is a hard thing to talk about with universal basic income, because I always say people spend on their needs first. Unless there's mental illness and addiction, that can change the game a little bit. A universal basic income is clearly not going to be a silver bullet for the types of systemic problems that you see in your community. So, what are some of your thoughts about that?
Yeah, just in terms of downtown LA, I remember visiting it in the 90s, in the 2000s. My parents actually, before moving to Arizona, where I was born, they actually immigrated to Los Angeles first. And my mom talks about her days in garment factories in downtown LA and how it was so scary and dangerous to even walk out. And growing up, I saw that whenever we visited my grandma but now when we think of downtown LA, yes, there is the Skid Row part of it, but if you, in terms of downtown LA on a general level, back in the days, you could not walk on the street in any part of downtown LA. Now you can. We have the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, we have a huge movie theater, we have the Staples Center, the Lakers, everything like it's glitz and glam. And you have we have the tallest building west of the Mississippi in downtown LA. It's the new Intercontinental building. And so it's like this glitz and glam. We have expensive condos that cost more than 3,000, 4,000 a month. And just all of this, but then you realize, oh wow, downtown LA is up and coming, like it's great. But it's actually everything that you saw visibly in front of you was just swept to a certain part of downtown, which we know as Skid Row. And so Skid Row has grown tremendously in years, over the years, over the decades. And not only that, now we have tent communities, tent homes, for a lot of people all over the city now, whether they be in Koreatown or Echo Park or Silver Lake or North Hollywood or what have you. It's common. So when you live in Los Angeles and you're picking up a family or friend from the airport for the first time, they come to see LA, a lot of their comments are, oh, whoa, oh, whoa.
All right, please excuse the little bit of technical issues that we just had. We're back in action right now, and we're going to kick back off where we left off. David, I was asking you about kind of the perception that a lot of Americans to this day have had about some of the more homeless areas of Los Angeles that do happen to be in the district that you're running for office for. What does it say to you that this has been a problem for so many years? Why is it that the incumbents that are representing that area of Los Angeles have failed to have really significant action on this front?
Yeah, homelessness is a crisis that is being experienced by more and more people in our district, outside of our district, next to our district, not just ours, but in cities across California and across the country. But and so there's many issues, and so obviously there's systemically things that must be fixed. People don't have jobs with living wages. We allow corporate developer money to come into our local politics and our federal politics to go ahead and have a stronghold in preventing certain individuals and families from continuing the life that they've always lived and suddenly being displaced. We have on a national scale, just we don't have a tenant's bill of rights. And if you think about it, the majority of our income is spent on rent. With whoever you may have, the majority of income is being spent on rent. And to give so much power to landlords, and I'm not saying that all landlords are bad, because there's obviously good ones too, but to put so much power and bargaining power and leverage into the landlords, domain without even being able to provide tenants a right to counsel, because then they have to go hire an expensive eviction attorney to protect them. What are we really doing? What systems are we allowing for our people to thrive and flourish and prosper? What systems do we have in place for them to get the help that they need without being charged an arm and leg, or without trying to gather money that they don't have? And so all of these things are so interconnected. There's so many factors to what are the contributing causes to homelessness, whether it be here in the city or whether it be other parts of the US. But what's clear, at least here locally in LA, is it's been a problem not just since 2-3 years ago. It's been a problem since 10 years ago, since 20 years ago, since, and I say that because I remember visiting my grandma a lot in the 90s, in the 2000s. My parents, before I was born in Arizona and before they immigrated to the US, to Arizona, they first landed in Los Angeles. And my mom worked at a garment factory in Los Angeles, and she would tell me about how it was impossible to walk around at night because you just couldn't, because just with in regards to how, yeah, you just couldn't walk at night. And to see, and now just to see downtown with high skyscrapers and with the tallest building west of the Mississippi, you think, oh, we solved our homelessness crisis, we solved everything. But no, if you just drive down, go through a few streets, take a left, take a right, go towards the southeastern part of downtown, you'll see Skid Row. That's where the city and our officials and our leaders ended up pushing people out to. And it's not just Skid Row anymore. Now we have tent communities all over our city, so that when you fly out to Los Angeles for the first time and you're like, yay, Hollywood, glitz, glamour everywhere. No, it's not. A lot of people, when they first land, they're like, oh, this is Los Angeles? Whoa, there's another tent community there. Oh, whoa, another community over there. And it's something that's just metastasized and grown for so long. And so the question, going back to your question, is why hasn't this been solved or addressed? And obviously, yes, because there's so many factors, there's probably going to be so much time, energy, and meetings being spent into it. But that's the grunt and sweat work that we need from our officials right now. If we were employed at a regular company, we wouldn't dodge whatever elephant's in the room or try not to address it. Our job depends on it. And so we would do whatever it takes to get whatever problems or projects accomplished or solved or addressed. But I think what we lack here for our leaders is this lack of conviction, lack of passion, lack of ownership for the community, where it's more like, oh, somebody else will address this if I don't. Oh, it'll still be on the table for somebody else to address. And so I think the bottom line to your question is, it's not a priority of our leaders right now, because if it was, then we should be seeing collaboration happening like crazy between local, city, county, state, and federal officials. But that's not happening in Los Angeles. We have a pay-to-play scheme that's continuing on the city level. We have county, state, and federal officials all taking from the same corporate donors and corporate interests. So what's the incentive when your pockets continue to be filled with cash, when your public career, your political office career looks good because you just need to serve here a few more years and then run for a different position after, and then play musical chairs with it. So to answer your question, yes, it does require a lot of work. How do we tackle it? Do we do it with the UBI? Do we do it with the Homes Guarantee? Do we do it with the Medicare for All, a Green New Deal? And those are all flagship policies on our platform. And it's part of our floor. It's a floor to stand on, where it's going back to, hey, what was America created to be? Why did people come here to the first place? To pursue a land of equal opportunity and freedom for all, to not be excluded. But if you look at the realities of America today, how many of those watching have stock? A majority of Americans don't even get to participate in stock market or whatnot. And what we have today is not even capitalism. It's a free, privileged. It's a free market for the privileged and few, and oligarchy that's happening. And so what we really need to do first is take money out of politics, but then really push for policies that prioritize the people at all costs. And that means these big fundamental change in policies that need to happen will be costly, but then there are ways to fund it. And as long as there are ways to fund it and also to rebudget in other ways, then we can do it. But it's just not a lack. It's just not a priority. Just
Right.
not a priority.
Right. It's we have socialism for the rich and brutal capitalism for the poor, and some of these incentive structures just do not exist because there's no profit in helping them. People are viewed solely as economic actors, and in the context of Los Angeles, people often will travel there to try and make their dreams come true. It gives, from what I've heard, Los Angeles this really unique character as a city in the United States of America. But
Mm-hmm.
like a universal basic income one is a cushion for which people, should their dreams not come true, you have to risk failure. Failure happens, but being able to bounce back and not wind up in some kind of vicious cycle of poverty is something that I think would help us prevent people winding up in the types of desperate positions that we see today. In terms of dealing with some of the issues that exist on the street level today, really quick, I want to break, and I want to come back to how I hear in your voice a lot of the experience that I've heard about in your past, coming as a advocate, a lawyer advocate for the poor. I want to hear you kind of give your progression to how you reached the spot that you are right now, running for California's 34th district. But there's all of these questions on it. Well, how exactly can we fit the UBI, which is not the silver bullet to end poverty? I know that's not what's being said here. We can get into that. How do we utilize a UBI for populations in tent cities, for instance, like the $1,200 checks that were sent out in March? How many of the people who are living in these areas of Los Angeles actually were able to get that money? I'm imagining very, very little of them. What would you kind of push for to help get the cash in the hands of these populations, while also obviously having extra tiers involved in the rollout to that process?
Yeah. For many people in Los Angeles, for those who would otherwise qualify to receive it, there's probably a lot of people that haven't received it. Um, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a majority of those in our unhoused communities in not being able to receive it. Because, for one thing, um, a lot of them might not have filed a tax return
Mm-hmm.
last year, a couple past years. And how did we receive the stimulus check? Through whatever account we receive our IRS related payments or debits or whatever they may be,
Mm-hmm.
deposits and or returns. And so I think for that, this again, one of my things for laughing is I laugh because I'm in shock or it's a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I don't get is, obviously, that not everyone files a tax return, and it's not just those that are senior, and who are retired, but no, like, we have human beings living on the streets. Aren't they human beings? They're not ghosts. And so this this inability to see or recognize other human beings, to be worthy and equal to receive the same benefits, that all Americans should be receiving, that in and of itself is very inhumane. And a way to instantly address and fix that is just open up a federal account for every single person and allow them to access that federal account when they need to. um, and and in a time like this, where people are living in a pandemic, unable to go anywhere, don't have jobs to put food on the table, don't have jobs to pay rent, um, what are we doing right now?
Mm-hmm.
So a UBI injected straight into a federal account, into the hands of the people, are where we need to go. And for Los Angeles, we really need to push for a homes guarantee type bill that Representative Ilhan Omar has in Congress right now, where we're building out 12 million social housing units, and that 12 million is based on the number of people experiencing homelessness in the U.S. today. and designating about 5% of those for wraparound permanent supportive housing, because there are some people that will need extra care, and to be able to do that, and then what pays for that? It's their UBI could help pay for it, and so just if we were to um, just put a little more time, sweat, blood, energy into it, like we can really push for change. But I just don't see that happening in a majority of our Congress members. And even if it's a process where it's going to take 2 4 years to eventually replace those members of Congress, those ones that are outgoing, then that's where we need to go. um, but look at, and I think we can still stay hopeful, because now's the turning of the tide.
Mm.
um, See how old Biden is. See how old all of those other Congress people are. See how old Nancy Pelosi is. She's not going to be there. I mean, my apologies to her relatives and family and but to be honest, like she's not going to be there for a long time because of her age. And so I think it's really, these are we're about to turn the next page and go into the next chapter. And I know that everybody's like really wanting to push, but it's like, don't give hope. Don't give up your hope. Don't give up your faith, because change doesn't happen just overnight. It's a process. And it's like going to the gym. It's like practicing. It's like putting in your 10,000 hours. Like we're barely on the cusp of it, but don't give up now because we're almost there. And so that's what I kind of went on a tangent from answering your question on what we need to do with UBI and getting that directly into the hands of the people. But even with that, some people might be thinking, "Oh, David, when is that going to happen?" It could happen next year. Um, who knows what could happen? Nobody thought this pandemic would have happened. Nobody thought that the government would be giving stimulus checks out, even though they're 2 times. But who knows what can happen? But just don't lose your faith and hope, because once you lose that, then yeah, nothing can happen. And so, um, yeah, just wanted to stress on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. I every time that I hear the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, talk, the Federal Reserve can't really make any political statements, or like they have to try and stay away from that line. But it's like he's using coded language every time he talks, where he's saying, the stimulus payments are things that we need in order to continue to foster a healthy, stable economy. And it's like he's constantly trying to get the message out there that a universal basic income, opening Fed accounts, like I think that he even kind of mentioned something like that in one. We could have the next administration come in and the Federal Reserve, and like open that dialogue with the Federal Reserve, suddenly open those accounts. I know homeless populations have a very deep distrust of many different types of authority. So we need this new burst of activism and people from the ground up that would be able to go into these communities and kind of say, these systems, these structures are here to help you, in fact. And guess what? Now you're able to have people who are a little bit more free to breathe because they have their own basic income. And we can actually start to address these parts of society that have been voiceless and neglected for so long. Very quickly, one thing that I always say is, a universal basic income is not about ending drug addiction. Those are two different questions, but they can kind of tie hand in hand in some ways. One thing that I am trying to learn more and more about is Portugal and its experiments with safe injection sites as a method to try and create addiction treatment centers. Have you had any experience, or do you have much knowledge about what they're doing over there and what your thoughts might be on that kind of system?
In terms of safe injection sites?
Right, which are locations in which people can
Yeah,
freely
yeah,
travel to.
yeah. No, I was just wondering if there was a follow-up question related to UBI, and I was thinking what the but yeah, no. In terms of, I'm supportive of safe injection sites, because right now, I mean, if there's ways that we can start helping them in smaller ways like that, that's where we can start. Instead of waiting for bigger change, at least start with the smaller change where we, the people, can start doing that. So there are um, uh, different groups that go ahead and help with that, and whether it be here in this city or in other cities, not just in our country, but in other countries as well, because I mean, conservatives might have the moral argument of, oh, that's enabling and doing. No, who are you to say that? Like, that's just an assumption that you have. Even there's no truth in that. I mean, that could be the truth for one particular case, but not the truth for all. And so I think even buying into that and arguing with that argument is just a waste of time, because right now what we can't do acknowledge is clean, safe new needles are better than used old ones, and that's what we need to help the people right now with. If Unless you're going to go ahead and give them housing right now and do everything and vote for these big changes that we need, don't you dare talk about safe injection sites and how you're against them. And so that's just my opinion on that.
Right, 100%, 100%. How big of an issue is nimbyism? Can you expand on that? Because that's some image of Los Angeles that I have. That part of the reason why things can't be done is because of the problem of nimbyism.
Yeah, so for those who are watching or haven't heard of what NIMBYism is, so NIMBYism is not in my backyard. So it's this movement or group of people or scattered or congregated or whatnot that believe in, hey, like caring for those who don't have a house, that's great, but not don't build or provide services to them in my neighborhood, in my area, because that will affect my property value, that'll affect this and that. Whether they think it'll affect their safety, that's very, very arguable. But in terms of just they don't want to ruin their look, their image, with that being in their neighborhood. And so that's the whole movement. And kind of with that, there are a lot of exclusionary zoning laws and things of that sort that do prevent um, leaders from being able to work more freely towards providing shelter and helping those who are unhoused. But but with that, there's also then the YIMBYism movement where it's, yes, in my backyard, yes, of course we need to help people. Yes, we need to build more housing. Yes, we need to remove exclusionary zoning policies and laws. Um, yes, we need to build more dwellings units in multi-dense areas that have corridors to transportation. We need to use buildings that have been abandoned, or instead of uh, building completely new ones, we need to rezone. And so that's the whole movement of YIMBYism, which is great too. But then also, I'm going to go a step further. Seth, is there's also what's called PHIMBYism, public housing, in my backyard. And so with Los Angeles, kind of a very short history in a nutshell. For Los Angeles, we don't have that many public housing units. We have less than 10,000 public housing units compared to other cities like New York, where they have a few several hundred thousand, as opposed to our less than 10,000. And the reason being is that, just like the NIMBYs, there was a group. I mean, they were probably hardcore, more hardcore conservative, but there was a group back in the 50s who really rallied against public housing of any kind of social housing, because it would ruin the landscape and the image of glamorous Hollywood and Los Angeles. So they succeeded, and so that's why we have less than 10,000 public housing units. Um, and and the reason why I'm bringing that up is it's not enough just to be YIMBY, because if you're YIMBY, you can go ahead and do all of this and increase more housing, but then who's to say though that it's going to be more affordable housing? Because there's nothing that acts as a restraint or as a check or as a balance on that. Here in Los Angeles, you could go gung-ho YIMBY all you want on the laws here and do that. But then what we see is these big development projects coming in with luxury building units that people that who are already living here can't afford. So then they have to move out.
Mm.
So it's basically just, and so I guess for me, I just want to be careful when people, it's definitely better to be a YIMBY than a NIMBY, but then also just to know that whatever label there is isn't enough. Like, we need to think outside the confines of a label, because yeah, if I go all out gung ho YIMBY, like, but I still need to think about the displacement of our communities that are happening on the neighborhood council that I'm in. And one of the reasons that I am on a neighborhood council here in Los Angeles, so in Los Angeles, just a quick primer, is in addition to the city council, we have what's like a neighborhood council system, 99 neighborhood councils all over the city of Los Angeles, each serving 40,000 residents. in with the intent to facilitate easier communication and between the city government and the people. And one of the things that we do as neighborhood council is we get to approve or deny a development project that's coming in. And our approval or denial has a lot of weight, because when the city planning office then looks at what we've recommended, then they'll go ahead and adjudicate accordingly. And most often or not, they really do give us a lot of credence and weight. And so what we do is we try to stop all of those development projects that try to displace our communities if they don't have a percentage quota, minimum percentage quota for more affordable housing for our lower income families. So if you don't have at least 30% of your units available for our lower income families, sorry, we're going to deny you. And so I think it's that extra step that we need to take, whether that be advocating for social housing units, like in public housing in the nimbyism movement, or whether that be working on a local level without labels and doing what you need to do to ensure that our communities are not being displaced and they're not being evicted. So that's definitely very important for all of us just to be aware of and to know.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Within these neighborhood councils, are there currently is there currently a lot of discussion happening about the concept of working from home, of the possible broadening out of a lot of these middle class families who have the privilege of the opportunity, the luck to be in a job, in a position, and career, to work from home and possibly leave higher pricing areas. This is a relatively new phenomenon, so I wasn't sure if there's much chatter happening in that space that you might know of.
No, I mean, I don't know of any kind of major study or trend that was reported in that. But given that we are in a pandemic, I know that those who have the money are able to break their lease, put their stuff in storage, and then live elsewhere. But that's not a majority. The majority of people have no money. So they're living with just unpaid rent right now, accruing, accruing, accruing. And when that, here in Los Angeles, it's a 1 year period you have to pay your rent by. If you don't have your rent all together by then you're out. So I'm really scared for what's going to happen in our city, in our district, everywhere, where our government leaders aren't really acting up and stepping up. I was actually shocked the other day, and I think it was a day or 2 days ago. Not, I guess I wasn't shocked, but just disappointed. Um, uh, Shocked because it was like, David, what would you expect otherwise?
Mhm.
But Representative Adam Schiff was at some neighborhood council meeting, and they asked him, hey, are you going to support Representative Ilhan Omar's Rent and Mortgage Cancellation Act? And the first thing he said was, oh, I don't know what that bill is. I'd have to look into it. And it's like, what the F? It's not, it's only like one of the most important bills that could really help the people right now, and you have no idea what that is? And so
Mhm.
it just makes you think, like, where's your head right now? Shouldn't that have been a discussion or conversation that you've already had with somebody? And shouldn't that have led you to naturally looking up, oh, is there something that somebody's already submitted in regards to this in Congress? So just to see that just shows you again what I had answered earlier, the lack of initiative, care, ownership, or whatever it may be. And so now it just makes me think, like, when Adam Schiff was leading and the whole process against Trump in the House, like, that was all for show. It was a personal career. It was all party politics. Because if he was somebody that truly cared, then he would have known what the rent and mortgage cancellation bill was, but he didn't. Um, but going to the second part of your question, Seth, right now, currently, like, not only are a majority of our community members about, like, afraid to face eviction in the future, whether that be in short term or long term, starting in September this month, everyone must be paying at least 25% of their rent. If they don't, then that eviction process can actually start in March. While up until now, if you were not able to pay rent, that eviction process starts a year from when you were unable to pay rent and you're able to pay it all. So it's these weird time-lapsed even rules and periods that a majority of our people don't even know,
Mhm.
and aren't even aware of. But and so then when they come to that point, they're already too late to even prevent things from happening. And so even the lack of communication, and the lack of knowledge that our community members have is crazy. And those gaps are our representatives' faults, because they should be ensuring, whether it be on the city, state, or county or federal level, that information is being properly disseminated and people know what to do. Then why are you our representative? But going back to the second part of your question, Seth, is during this pandemic, while people like you and me might be able to converse and have our interviews through Zoom and Google, there's a lot of people that don't have internet. There's a lot of people who don't have a smartphone. There's a lot of people who can't access any of that. And not just that, but their jobs don't require video conferencing or Zoom. Their jobs don't require a laptop or whatnot, because they're essential workers working out there. And so we see a higher percentage of COVID and it affecting our community in communities like our Latino community here in Los Angeles. There's a higher rate of them being physically harmed, and the disease really hitting them hard because they're always out there. And so just kind of in a lot of these things, there's so many factors that I feel like our leaders really need to take into account 360 on a circle scale. But because they're in their bubbles, they're only able to relate to a small percentage at the top and legislate it according to their needs. And that's a real problem.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely tragic. It's tragic the way that we have been treating our quote unquote essential workers during this pandemic. It's tragic that these workers who have been historically taken advantage of by society, underpaid, overworked, or they can't get enough hours and they're chopped up in that kind of manner. The way that they're just exploited in this dramatic way, and then we try to turn around and call them heroes, but they are being disproportionately affected by the disease itself. They're dying at higher rates, especially these minority communities. I know after we're done with this conversation today, you have a Latino community town hall at 7 p.m., 10 p.m. Eastern time. Hopefully, I'll have this uploaded by then so that people might be aware and I can get a few more viewers over your way. Latinos constitute the majority of the population in your district by, I think, about 66 or so. Is that right? What are some of the issues that the Latinx community really cares about in the 34th District of California?
Yeah. Well, in regards to our district, and Seth, I think this might have to be the last question. Yeah, but in regards to the Latino community here, there's about 60% that make up our district. But in terms of voting constituency wise, there's only less than 50%. And that's because we have a lot of undocumented communities in the Latino population as well. But a lot of the things that just even the undocumented people are experiencing are horrible working conditions, theft of wages, because they're not able to use the same labor and employment legal process that all of us can use. So they're taken advantage of. They can be fired at any time, threatened with their jobs, being left with nothing, then scrambling to find another temp job, and then being fired again. And then they have to work 12, 16 hours a day with no overtime, no meal rest breaks, nothing else. And so there's just so many ways we're taking advantage of them. And with our DACA recipients now, even with that, the Supreme Court still ruling in favor, like their 2 years is now still, I think they have to apply now every 1 year. And then now there's more restrictions on top of it. And so we're really suffocating so many different people groups, whether they be those who are unhoused, whether they be Black or brown or immigrants or undocumented, what have you. And it's really the government that's oppressing the people right now that really has to stop. Other issues that our Latino community are experiencing are, example, financial depression. And I think that's a thing that's very reflective of every immigrant community here, because they're all working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet pre-COVID. And now during COVID, they have no jobs. And so we need to start talking about the financial depression of our different immigrant communities here. And why is it that 2 parents have to always be working so that the children never get to see their parents at the same time on any given day? And that's a reality here for many members of the community. and whether that be with, and because of that, because people have to be working, they're not able to go ahead and study further and take and continue schooling or education. And so this affects people's lives in so many different ways, and doesn't set them up for success in the later parts of their lives either. And that's very problematic. And we definitely need to start addressing that. But here with the California Democratic Party establishment machine is they're all still corporately funded. They all still play their party politics, all serving corporate interests over the people. And what they do here at California Democratic Party is they put people that look like the Black, brown, Asian communities, and they put them in office in those communities to make it seem like they're working for the communities, but they're not. They're not legislating for them in the room. They're just showing up at photo ops. So it's a way to, they put these corporate puppets and minions in the place to keep these immigrant communities, Korean, Asian, Latino, Black, whatever communities, to keep them quiet. And it's something that we really need to be aware of and be vigilant about.
Yeah, it goes right back to the importance of having a grassroots campaign, which is one that you are running. Very quickly, just to point out too, there is the Basic Income March happening this Saturday, September the 19th at 2 p.m. at MacArthur Park. Go if you are in that area. David is going to be speaking there, I believe. Any last plugs that you'd like to give before we head out?
Yeah, this week is Basic Income March week. Go ahead and follow Income Movement. On for those living in Los Angeles, our Basic Income March is at MacArthur Park. We'll be meeting in a parking lot near there at 1 to decorate our cars, and then it starts at 2. So join the car parade. I will also be speaking there as well. And for those who are wanting to know how they can support, you can go visit davidkim2020.com, learn about our campaign, volunteer, and donate.
Wonderful. Fantastic. David, thank you so much for appearing on my show today. We're all rooting for you. Keep up the good work, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thank you so much, Seth.